All right, welcome back to another installment of the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro from The Athletic, Miami Hurricanes beat writer. That is Carlos Ledo of the MIA All Day Podcast. It is Friday, right around 1 o'clock, September 15th, the day after Miami improved to 3-0 with a 48-7 win over Bethune-Cookman. We're not going to get too deep into the game. We will talk about some of the results, but look, when you're a 53.5-point favorite to beat an FCS team and you basically go out there and take care of business, there's not a lot you can take away from it, but we will do some of that. We will talk some about Miami's recruiting efforts. They got a big commitment from a five-star defensive lineman in the 2025 class out of Miami Central, Armando Blunt. So this is the fourth five-star commitment Mario's picked up. I wanted to talk a little bit about what some of the ex-Canes are doing, the guys that Mario got rid of. There's 27 guys in other places in college football. 8 of them have started games elsewhere. I wanted to touch on that. We are going to get to some mailbag questions, but Carlos, let's start with the game. Let's start with where the Hurricanes are right now. Your biggest takeaways, and then I'll give you mine.
Well, first of all, let's recognize what's going on here because I don't want the elephant in the room not to be addressed. Okay, I look like Blackbeard the pirate. Yes, I finally got my Just for Men on. Looking fresh. The beard is not weird anymore, so
Yes.
You're welcome, YouTube audience. As far as last night's game is concerned, it is what it is, man. I don't know what. There's not much to draw from it. I think the offense looked really good in the first half. They looked efficient. I thought the defense came out a little bit sluggish. I know that's tough to say. I think they missed Cam Kitchens back there in terms of leadership, not just in terms of his ability to get guys in the right places, to get guys focused. Because there was a lot of mental mistakes that went on early on in the first half that the defense was sort of getting away with. That I don't think against a better team would have actually been gotten away with. So that wouldn't have gone under the radar against a better team, against a better opponent. And that's to say, those things happen, right? You come in against an opponent like this on a short week, you're expecting to blow them out, and sometimes you lose focus. But that's why you need those leaders in the locker room and in the huddle to get guys focused and let them know that we're not competing against the team on the field. We're competing against ourselves. We're trying to get better week by week, because the ultimate goal is not to beat this team, but to be the best version of ourselves that we can. So far, I think the Hurricanes have looked the part of a team that's improved. But again, I'm going to hold judgment until I see them against a better opponent. Texas A&M to me is a good opponent. It was a top 25 team, but that is probably going to be a 7-5 SEC team, and it's hard to judge them long term in terms of how they can compete against elite competition based on that A&M game. Now, do I think they'll be in the upper tier of the ACC based on what we've seen so far? Yeah, I think so. But that still doesn't mean that I don't think they're not gonna struggle against teams like NC State, Pitt, definitely Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson. So we'll see what happens. I think this is an improved team, but am I all the way sold that this team is elite or on the cusp of being something special? Not just yet.
Wow. So you're the opposite of Kelvin Harris. You're not saying 15-0 right now.
No, man. Listen, you know how Kelvin is, right? He's tried to get me to join his cult for many years now and drink the poisoned Kool-Aid, and I refuse. I'm not going down like all those people in Georgetown all those years ago with that. If you guys look that up, it's a great documentary on it too. Find that information, Google it.
All right. Well, listen, a couple of takeaways for me. Tyler Van Dyke, Xavier Restrepo continue to cook, and it really is beginning to look easy for them. I know it's Bethune-Cookman, but what I like is the consistency, the fact that we didn't see a drop off. Jacoby George scored a touchdown. He's got 4 of them now. Last year, Colby Young led the Hurricanes with 5 touchdown receptions. Jacoby's got 4 after 3 games.
Yep.
The yards after catch continues to rise. A lot of yards after catch yesterday. I wrote how after 2 games, Miami was almost halfway at their total for Yak in terms of receivers. So again, a lot of production there. 3 starting defensive linemen were out. We'll get into the injuries here real quick. Akeem Mesidor, Nigel Lee Kelly, and Branson Dean. You already mentioned Cam Kitchens being out and essentially how Jaden Harris ended up starting in his place at safety. But the 3 defensive linemen were out. Miami still ended up getting 4 sacks in this game, which is good. I mean, they didn't have any against Texas A&M, but you're right. I think it looks different. This defense, I came away from yesterday's game feeling like, thank God Miami's got a really good starting unit, because I don't feel that confident in a lot of the backups. Not that they didn't play well or can't play well, but I just think it's different. There's a different level of talent. I think Mario basically said as much in his post-game press conference, especially from the offensive line perspective. Emery Williams got 1 series when he took over in the second half at quarterback. First series, he had the first team offensive line, went right down the field to score it. Last two series, they scored one touchdown, and he was feeling a lot more heat with the backups in there. So to me, everywhere you look on this team, the first unit looks really good so far. The backups, not so much. So it shows you that we're still in year 2 of this sort of progress. One thing I did note from watching the offensive line work, Matthew McCoy, the redshirt freshman, split time with Javian Cohen, the Alabama transfer at left guard, throughout the entire first half. They alternated series. And McCoy is a guy that the coaching staff has talked up a lot. Alex Mirabal absolutely loves him. So really, he's kind of established himself, I think, as the clear-cut sixth man, a guy that they trust enough to put in the rotation with the ones. So that was an interesting development. Cohen, by the way, split time last year with a true freshman at Alabama. So maybe he's just nice enough to sort of accept that he's going to be sitting on the bench some and come out, or maybe he's just not playing as hard as he needs to every single snap. I don't know. I'm not in the coaching room. I just know that that's who's splitting time. I mentioned Jared Harris starting at safety. We also didn't see Mark Fletcher. Mark Fletcher and Cam Kitchens were not at the game. The other three guys who I mentioned is injured. Kelly, Dean, and Mesidor were. Mesidor was spotted walking into Hard Rock Stadium during the Canes walk, I guess, with a boot or something on him. He was wearing pants during the game, so you couldn't see it. But I know that Rivals reported that he was wearing a boot walking in the stadium. Kelly and Dean were not. So that's an encouraging sign. And from what my understanding is, with both Cam and Mark Fletcher, those were head injuries, concussion type related things. So that's why they weren't there. There's a chance, I guess, they could be back for Temple, but there may not. Mario may just give them another week off. So the good news is it feels like none of these injuries, Carlos, are serious, like season ending or season altering. And I think that's important for Miami because they're going to have a few weeks here, like you said, to get healthy before they they're going to play at Temple. They've got a bye week, and then they've got Georgia Tech, and then after that it's the trip to North Carolina. So you've got several weeks here to get healthy. Those were my biggest takeaways from the game, and I thought at times too the running game looked good. Don Chaney showed me something on that drive, that 65 or 55-yard drive he engineered all by himself. That was encouraging, but that's what I took away from it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the running game, they've come a long way from last season or even the season before. And I think the mix of running backs and styles is fun to watch because you're getting different things from different guys. You're getting more of a slasher, quicker running back in Henry Parrish, although he's breaking tackles this year at a lot more at a higher rate than he did last season. He looks a little bit stronger. AJ Allen's a thicker dude. Maybe not as straight line fast or quick as Donald Chaney or Henry Parrish, but he can plant and get upfield and break tackles. And he runs physical, which I enjoy. And Donald Chaney Jr. looked really good last night, showed some moves, some ability to go lateral quickness and then get upfield. Hopefully if he remains healthy, he could be that third back and maybe give Mark Fletcher a rest and let him develop over time instead of having to be pressed into action as a freshman as much as we anticipated. So that's all good news to me. I think another thing that I noticed was, you're right with TVD. He's been very accurate with the football. He's been able to throw it down the field. And I think with the way they've called plays for him has allowed him to get into the flow of games. Because right now his completion percentage is at 76%. And they've started every game with taking what the defense gives him underneath, with hitch routes, with quick screens. They're getting him acclimated to the game. They're letting him get settled in to then be able to go down the field later on once he's warmed up and in rhythm. And I think that makes a huge difference. Where we saw him struggle a year ago, or even when he started as a redshirt freshman, where he would have those struggles early on in games sometimes, where he just needed a few completions to get his confidence going. And early on, sometimes that just wouldn't happen. It would take a while for him to get into the flow of games. And I really like the way Shannon Dawson is calling games for him so far.
Yeah, and they listen, they're not getting in many third and long situations. I'm looking at this now. I'm looking at the stats from last night, and granted, it's Bethune-Cookman, but they were in third. They were only in third down, I think, 5 times in the entire game, and the average distance to go on third down was 5 yards. It wasn't third and long. It was only one time where they had a third and long. So that's encouraging. And that's the kind of stuff that when you're a really good offense, you're running the football, and they ran for like 239 or whatever. That's just something that you naturally do. You put yourself in third and short, and that's going to they keep that going, they're going to have a great offense all season long. We
Yeah,
thought they would be better, but I think it's even exceeded our expectations a little bit.
exactly. And I think you look at the results from the past, and you've seen bigger scores against Bethune recently. Even the 19 game with Dan Enos at the offensive coordinator and Jaron Williams at quarterback was like 63-0. And you would compare the two results and say, wow, they must have played better against Bethune back then. But you could clearly see the difference in this team. Not necessarily the result on the scoreboard doesn't necessarily reflect the change and the growth in this team offensively.
I want to talk a little bit about Armando Blunt because Mario, since the Texas A&M win, he's got 2 commitments. Both of the guys are in the 2025 class, or at least right now anyway. Waden Charles is a 4-star wide receiver from Palm Beach Central, one of the best kids that I saw this spring when I was watching 7-on-7 football. Definitely an impressive receiver, big-bodied. He's not Jeremiah Smith, but I don't think he's that far off. I think he's very much similar to a Chance Robinson, where he's probably a number 2 wide receiver on a really good Power 5 team with the potential to be a receiver number 1. So he's very talented, a very good pickup. But the big one obviously was Armando Blunt, who is 6'3", 250, transferred to Miami Central this year. He's the number 5 rated player in the entire 2025 class, according to the 247 Sports Composite. Like I said, the 4th 5-star Mario's gotten a commitment from, JoJo Trader being the other one in this cycle. And then, of course, Francis Maui-Go and Samson Okunlola, who both obviously are playing quite a bit here early on in their careers at Miami. But the reason it was important to get Blunt, he's a guy who I think a lot of people were pegging towards Florida State in the recruiting process. And I think if Miami doesn't impress him with a win against Texas A&M, they probably don't get this commitment. And, he's got a chance. From what I was, I spoke with Gabby Urrutia of 247 last night. Gabby, of course, does a terrific job covering recruiting for 247. He was telling me last night that there's a chance that he could, this kid, the one I just mentioned, the defensive lineman, he could end up reclassifying to the 2024 class. It's kind of up to him. The ball is sort of in his court to decide whether or not he wants to do it. I think academically, Blunt I think he's a 4.7 GPA kid, just a real smart kid. And so there's a potential there, but we don't know yet if he'll do that. But if he does, then that gives Miami the big 5-star defensive lineman that they wanted in this class to sort of stack talent. So important pickup for Mario. And there's going to be more. Like, there's other kids. I think, I asked James Williams after the game last week against Texas A&M, what's it like being a 5-star and not seeing Miami win? Because when he was being recruited out of high school, he didn't see it. They didn't win it. And he says, look, that's all we wanted to see. We wanted to see this program prove it in big games. So Miami beats its first SEC opponent in 10 years. Even if Texas A&M doesn't, ends up being 7-5 or 8-4, and they don't have a great year, it's still the kind of win this program just wasn't capable of. And now I think you see Armando Blunt, you see Waden Charles. There's real signs here that this is what this program needed to be able to prove it to recruits.
Right. It's one of the signposts of this program going in the right direction, something they haven't done in 10 years. And adding these recruits now will only start to continue to build that momentum. And as they continue to win throughout the season, let's say they get a win against Clemson, then that starts to shift that even more. And that momentum starts to snowball even more towards the direction of landing more guys. And it's amazing. I think winning the recruiting battle against Florida State also is huge, especially when Florida State is on the rise as they are this season. And doing what they're doing in the recruiting trail. So continuing to win battles against them, it will definitely raise the profile for the Hurricanes moving forward as well.
I wanted to dive into an article I wrote earlier this week for the Athletic.
Do we have to, Manny? Come on, man.
Huh?
Do we have to? Come on, man.
You don't want to?
I'm just kidding.
Okay. All right. I thought you were giving me real shit there.
No, I'm not Kelvin. We're good. We're good.
No, I did this article. I broke down the yak. I mentioned how good the cornerbacks are playing through the first 2 games. But a part of the article that I know a lot of people were talking about online and were asking me about was the 27 former players. And again, this is just sort, you and I were always talking about subjects, right, that we can get onto besides the game, besides what we watched. And we're going to get to the mailbag shortly.
So this is the VH1 Where Are They Now segment.
This is the VH1 Where Are They Now? 27 guys left. 8 I mentioned are starters. 4 are full-time starters. So John Campbell is a starting left tackle at Tennessee. And then Elijah Roberts and Jordan Miller are starting for SMU. And then you've got Alan Hay, who plays for Temple. Alan Hay, of course, didn't play here a whole lot, but he's starting for Temple. So when Miami plays Temple next week, there'll be a former Hurricane in their starting lineup, a guy who was basically at the bottom of the totem pole. But I just wanted to go over some of these other guys. Jalen Knighton got the start in the opener for SMU and again, there's 6 guys at SMU that are former Hurricanes that went to go play for Rhett Lashlee.
Yeah, Rhett Lashlee went shopping.
Yeah, he had a fumble in the loss to Oklahoma. He's averaging 4.3 yards per carry on 33 attempts, only 1.48 yards after the carry. Al Blades Jr. started for Duke in the upset of Clemson, but came off the bench against Lafayette last week. No Duke on the schedule this year. Isaiah Dunson started for Baylor in the opener that they lost to Texas State, played only 19 snaps off the bench in game 2 against Utah. Khalil Brantley started, the tight end, and played 92 snaps in the opener for FAU, didn't play in their second game. Romello Brinson, Keyshawn Smith, 2 guys that Miami was very high on in recruiting. Neither of them are starting for SMU. They're coming off the bench. They've got 3 catches each. Thomas Davis, the edge rusher, the former 4-star from Georgia, who I wrote about. He came off the bench in his first 2 games for Appalachian State. Avery Huff, remember him, the big 4-star from St. Thomas Aquinas?
Who was here 19 years and got like 3 snaps.
He played 51 snaps in 4 years with the Hurricanes. He got his first sack for FIU against North Texas. Gilbert Frierson, who started 15 games for Miami, 18 snaps off the bench in the first 2 games for Louisville.
I didn't even realize that guy had any eligibility left.
Yes. Jabari Ishmael played 14 snaps at Miami. He's played 2 snaps at Marshall so far. Thad Franklin, the big 4-star running back who wanted more playing time, he's gotten 1 carry at Louisiana Monroe. He scored on it, scored a touchdown on a 1-yard run. Jalen Harrell, another 4-star guy that Manny recruited, Manny Diaz, 21 snaps at Miami. He's played 19 off the bench for UMass. He's got 1 tackle. Keyshawn Washington, the safety. He's playing at Garden City Community College. He's got 5 tackles. Chris Graves, the big-time blue-chip cornerback.
Recent departure, yeah.
1 snap at Ole Miss. Jake Garcia, 3rd-team quarterback at Missouri. Jakari Clark, backup right guard. He started 42 games at center for Miami. Backup right guard at SMU. And then Avante Williams, the all-world safety. He's not stepped on the field, even though he's been healthy at Maryland. So what is that? When I read you those results, what does that say to you?
Says they were a little overhyped when they were brought into the University of Miami. They were not as good as advertised. And then you could see with the results over the last couple of years and the production, just it wasn't there. I think you could see just individually with the guys that have replaced some of those and some of those guys that you mentioned now in the lineup. I mean, who would you rather have, Colby Young or Keyshawn Smith?
Right.
Who would you rather have, Jakari Clark or Matt Lee? I think, Avante Williams is a very talented guy, but I think both Cam Kitchens and James Williams are light years ahead of him. And that was his problem. He wasn't going to get on the field all that much with those 2 guys ahead of him. So you see the difference in terms of talent that's been brought in. Some of these guys are also recruits that were brought in by Manny. I think the difference is you've got to have a better hit rate on these guys. You may be landing 4-stars and blue chippers, but the transition to college is a little bit different. So you need to be able to land the top tier 4-stars and make sure you don't miss on those guys. And I think Mario's doing a better job of that. Well,
and I think the one thing we can certainly take away is for everybody who says, hey, Manny Diaz had talent or Mario had talent last year, if those guys were really good and they weren't being coached up well, they should all have starting jobs in other places, right? Because they all went to lesser schools.
And performing very well then. They should.
Right. Right. Even at lesser schools, they should be starting, right? Like you would think they were brought in as a transfer. Yet, what does it tell you that through 2 games, a lot of these guys are, except for 8 have cracked the starting lineup. 8 of 21. That's not a good percentage. That doesn't speak well to what they were doing here at Miami. And again, I'm not doing this to crap on these guys. I'm just doing it to give perspective for the program overall, for people who say it's not talent. Miami doesn't have a talent problem. No, but they do have an identifying the right guy problem. They had that for a long time. And those guys, there's not many. You can't go and look at the last few years and say, man, there were some really good players who left Miami who are tearing it up elsewhere. Like Lorenzo Lingard. I don't know that he's even touched the field at Florida. And he was a 5-star recruit. I mean, we could go down the list. There's a lot of guys over the last few years. And so don't come with the bullshit that there wasn't a talent problem at Miami. Don't even come with there wasn't a developmental problem at Miami. Like it's obvious. They identified the guys who just weren't good fits, and they're not just good fits here. They're not good fits elsewhere for the most part. So,
I like it when you
Mario.
get aggressive. When you get aggressive
Well,
and start laying down the law.
I mean, I hate having these arguments with people over and over again who just look at recruiting rankings and say, well, no, it's like we're beyond that now, right? Like we have to be beyond that. We have to be smarter than that. We shouldn't just say, hey, if that was the case, Texas would have won the national championship 8 times in the last 30 years, right? I mean, it's a problem, I think, of just relying simply on rankings to say, hey, this team should be good because they've got X amount of, blue
And I think
chips.
there's a couple issues, right? One is a lot of fans, because recruiting has become so popular now and it's available to everyone. If you sign up for a subscription at various sites to stay in tune with every single second of a recruit's life, basically, when the 5-star farts in class, you get a message immediately on the message board. You get an alert to your phone. So people tend to feel like they know these guys, and they fall in love with high school recruits before they even touch the field at the University of Miami. So these guys that they fall in love with, if they're not getting playing time, they get upset and they feel like, hey, you're doing this guy wrong. You're an idiot as a coach. How could you not be playing this guy? He's amazing. What are you doing? Also, some people get very tied into these guys when they get at high school in the University of Miami, when they get there and get information from them. And it feels like they have a strong bond with these guys, and you stand up for your boys. I understand it. I get it. But it doesn't mean that they're the right fit, or that that's automatically going to transfer what they did in high school onto the field, because it takes more than talent. The guy could be extremely talented, but once you get to the next level, what ends up happening is you also have to work, and you have to have the right mental makeup to be successful, because everybody's talented at that level. When you get to University of Miami or any other Power 5 school, everybody is talented. Now, the difference is what separates people from being average, good, or elite is their work ethic and their mental makeup and their ability to take coaching. And if you don't have all those things, all those things combined into one, then you end up getting a player that has holes and a player that doesn't develop into what he should be. And unfortunately, a lot of these guys come from high school into college now with egos, and they feel that their shit doesn't stink and that they don't need to take the coaching, or that the coaching staff needs them more than the player needs the coaching staff. And that ends up creating a toxic relationship where there is no growth and there is no trust between both sides, and eventually it goes wrong. And I think that's happened on occasion here.
All right, I want to get to the mailbag, Carlos. Let's dive in. I don't know what order we're gonna go in here because I've got a lot of responses here on Twitter.
Hit shuffle. Let's do it.
Let's hit shuffle on it. I'm gonna start with this one because it kind of goes with the recent story I put out in the Athletic with Grace Rayner. This is from Jay Salter, or JRS Air 23. What do you think is the ceiling for this team?
I think if all things go well and they stay healthy, I think they can be 10-2.
I'm going to go different from putting up a record. I think that the ceiling for this team now, as is, if they stay healthy, is an ACC championship game appearance. I don't think they're good enough to beat Florida State. I think Florida State's a little deeper than they are at certain positions and can survive some injuries. But I think this team is good enough now to at least play for the ACC title. I wouldn't say that it's impossible they can beat Florida State. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think the ceiling for them, the realistic ceiling, is a spot in the ACC title game. They've got Clemson at home, they've got North Carolina on the road, and they've got FSU on the road. They win 2 out of those 3. They should be in the ACC title game.
Yes. But again, there's also those sneaky games that we see every season in the ACC with Miami. Teams that maybe shouldn't compete against them that do, and then sometimes those things go wrong. So who knows?
All right, this is from Kane Finn. Does Mario have the support of the board of trustees and the athletic director in regards to time? Yes, we're 3-0, but this seems like a build that will take 4 to 5 years, and we are in year 2. We can't keep being impatient with coaches and could use some stability. I think if the board of trustees and the athletic director and the leaders at Miami were not going to give Mario time, he wouldn't have signed a 10-year, $80 million deal. They knew that they know that this is going to take time. I think they're excited by what they've seen through the first 3 games this year. But I mean, I've said this before. I think internally the hope was, hey, maybe if everything works out, they'll be 8-4, 9-3, and have a good year and recruit well. I don't think anybody, and again, this is not the coaching staff. This is just, I'm talking about people around the program, around the university. The feeling was this is going to be step by step. So anything better than 8-4, 9-3, I think exceeds expectations, even internally.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree.
This is from Rashawn 954. When do you think they're going to play Jakari Brown?
Well, I think if last night was an indicator, I don't think he's going to see much action this year unless there's an injury to Emery Williams or Tyler Van Dyke. If he was going to be in the plans long term, unfortunately, he would have gotten snaps last night because Emery Williams played the entire second half. So it shows me right now that they have more confidence. Not only they have more confidence in Emery Williams, but the problem is that they probably don't see Jakari progressing enough as a passer.
I think those are all fair points, Carlos. I would also bring up the point that Shannon Dawson was sort of asked about the quarterbacks a couple weeks ago. And if I remember correctly, he said something to the effect of, trying to basically redshirt both of them. And we know the rule now. You're allowed to play in up to 4 games before you sort of lose your redshirt. Personally, I think that they're probably saving Jakari for the
Final
games,
four, yeah.
for the games that matter in terms of ACC, if they need a gadget play, if they need him to run the ball, like something happens to Tyler and they're going to change the game plan and run the ball a whole lot. Like you can surprise a team with something you haven't shown yet. And I think that's why they haven't put him out there. I think a lot of this too is early in the season, non-conference games that you should win at home. It's a safe place to play Emery too, right? Like you don't want to burn his red shirt. Okay, get him in early in the season. So I wouldn't say that I don't think we're going to see Jakari Brown at all. I think if that was the case, I think if Emery had completely surpassed him and the coaching staff had made it clear that Emery was the number 2, I think Jakari Brown is probably looking to go somewhere else. And there'd probably be rumors about him leaving. I haven't heard that yet. So let's see how the rest of the season plays out, but I wouldn't be surprised if Jakari is saved for, some of those gadget plays and maybe some,
which I would love to see because I love the kid's talent.
Right. All right, let's get on to Sam Knowlton, who says, how many games will the special teams lose by themselves? Sam, it was one bad snap, brother. It was one bad snap this week. That's all it was.
Muffed punt last week and listen, special needs to tighten up. Special teams needs to tighten up.
All right. This is from Vaughn_Kane. More of a comment than a question, but the team just feels different, more physical, more focused, and more confident. We've been here before. Not ready to say the U is back, but are you ready to say the U is back, Carlos?
No, I'm not. Do they look better than last year? Absolutely, they do. Like Vaughn says, they do look more physical. They do look more forceful at the point of attack, defensively, especially when they make contact with a ball carrier. They're taking guys down on the first hit. They're not missing as many tackles as before. They're in better position on defense. They're more efficient on offense. All those things are positive signs, but we got to see it continue throughout the season.
This is from Benny Boondocks. How did the crow meal taste? Did you marinate it in adobo? Seriously, what are your thoughts on the new coordinators? Benny, I didn't have any crow. I think figuratively it tasted great. I'm happy to see the Hurricanes performing well. For all the people who think I'm a Canes hater, first of all, you're dead wrong. I grew up in this city. I went to the Orange Bowl growing up.
First of all, look at the banner over your shoulder, man.
Well, listen, that's part of that is decorations for the show, but I got to be a journalist. I can't just, sit here and I don't root for the Hurricanes. I can't sit there in a press box and root for the Hurricanes. I certainly root for good stories. I certainly root for the success of the program because the more success they have, the better it helps my numbers. But hey, listen, I'll take crow any day if that means Miami's winning games. They've got, like I said last week, they got a lot to prove, and you still think they have a lot to prove, Carlos, and I don't disagree with you. So, what are my thoughts on the new coordinators, Ben? My thoughts are they're the perfect fit for right now. They're the perfect fit for where this program is from a talent perspective. They maximize what they get out of these players. Do I think that these guys would have success with better talent? Sure. I'm sure any coordinators could, but I suspect that at some point or another, because college football is ever changing, because teams grasp what it is that you're doing, because they do better job game planning for you, these guys are going to run into a little bit of a problem. It happens to every coordinator. There's always somebody who comes up with a game plan that is a wrinkle, right? That confuses guys. Miami's players, for the most part, for the better part of the last 20 something years. I mean, think back to when they were really good, Carlos, in the Fiesta Bowl. What happened to Vinny Testaverde in that game, right? When they lost to Penn State.
In that game, supposedly Mark Trestman sold their playbook, and that's why they lost.
But
other than that,
But my point is, even the greatest Canes teams have been baffled. Like right now, it's great.
Even against Ohio State in 2002.
Right. Absolutely. Like there's other people who get paid to coach well. And right now, both of these guys are doing a great job. But I guess my overall point is, I don't know. This was a big topic, and we can get into this, Carlos. Like you think about Dabo Sweeney with Brent Venables, right? Like it was a tag team effort, right? Like Brent Venables was the defensive guy for Clemson. We've seen Clemson sort of fall off a little bit here. Does Mario, I think it'd be great if Mario could find himself an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator who marry themselves to the program. And maybe the program's in a good enough shape now where, they can afford to keep these guys. I don't know. Maybe they pay, maybe these guys become among the highest paid coordinators in college football. But my point is, I would love to see it because this program needs some consistency at those spots.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're going to project that forward, I think these two guys would be the types of coaches that you could probably have them married to the program for a long time because, as you said last week, this is Shannon Dawson's real first shot as calling plays by himself, being the full-time offensive coordinator. And Lance Guidry has been mired in the MAC, in smaller conferences at Marshall and other places because of his personal history. So he hasn't been able to be elevated. So because he got this shot with Mario, will probably be more loyal to Mario long-term here at the program and less willing to bounce somewhere else. But I mean, again, those are individual choices that these guys have to make. But I think ultimately, you're right. There needs to be consistency in the program and the style more than anything. There needs to be a consistent style on offense and defense. And I think ultimately, long term, for the vision of this program and the types of recruits you want to land, these styles on offense and defense match the kind of players you want to grab and have at this program and build around because it's aggressive, it's fast, and it really takes advantage of the athleticism on both sides of the football. Now, like you said, I think there's going to be times down the road where they're going to be matched against teams that are, equally talented or slightly more talented. And a game plan comes along where they're going to have to fight their way out of it. And they're going to have to figure things out. And, A&M had a lot of talent, but maybe they didn't scheme up as well as another team might, like a Florida State, a Clemson, Carolina, even an NC State, who's got a really good coaching staff that can figure some things out. So although it's early in the season, we haven't seen a lot from the offense and the defense. It's been pretty basic so far. I think last night they ran the same packages they ran against Miami, Ohio, just because it was a short week and it was the easiest thing to do was just to reinstall whatever they had. And it was not an FBS opponent. So that was the best way to go. But I think you're going to have to get yards on offense other than the quick screen and the hitches. Yeah. I think you're going to have to develop things a little bit more on offense. I think you're going to have to get a little bit more consistent in the run game against better teams, although the run games look good, but they're not all the way there yet. So don't get too excited. Defensively, we've seen them, blow coverages here and there. And if there's a team that can block their pressure, then that's going to be a problem for the secondary because the secondary is getting the advantage of the pressure being caused by the front and making the quarterbacks get rid of the football quickly and on the move. If somebody can block their pressure and take advantage of their man coverage and their blitz packages through scheme, then that could be a problem.
All right. We got some more questions here. This kind of leads into what we were just talking about in terms of getting beat on certain plays. Hurricane Q or 16V Lover. Last two games, it appears that the wheel route has burned Miami. Texas A&M did it a couple of times, went 2 for 3, big gains. Bethune did it 1 for 2. The first was wide open and they missed it. What is the U doing wrong on that play? Is the linebacker not getting there fast enough? It feels like North Carolina and FSU will exploit it.
So what's happening on those plays generally is that they're catching Miami in a blitz and they're playing man, right? So what happens is they'll motion away from where they're running the wheel route, and then the Miami will bring a pressure off the edge, and nobody's rotating over to catch a wheel route out of the backfield. And that tends to happen. Another thing that might end up happening later in the season that could be a problem is a late tight end leak or release where you have a boot action to one side of the field and the tight end releasing opposite, late, delayed, acting as if he's blocking and then coming across the field and everybody misses him. So those actions are going to be a problem, like I said, because of scheme. If they can block the front, block the pressure, and take advantage of Miami's blitz because you're having to play man and they're confused in terms of the alignment and the routes that are coming at them, and you're not picking up the right guy based on motion or formation, that could be an issue.
Yeah, I think it's certainly something to watch, and good point there, pointing that out. Our reader here. All right, let me go back to some more questions on the on the thread here that we have on Twitter. This is from Des Solomon, Sir Des Blackfire. What is the game this
Sir
season that
Des.
Sir Des, yes. What is the game this season that will make you say, okay, this Miami team is the real deal? And what exactly would you need to see to get that confirmation?
So I'll give two answers. Number one, if they blow out Clemson, then I'll feel more confident in terms of this team is on, ready to compete at the highest level of the ACC. They can't just beat Clemson because you could see Clemson's having issues and struggles. So they still have a ton of talent. They still got to prove it. But if they blow them out, if they totally dominate them, that makes me feel a lot better. The other one is Florida State. If they can beat Florida State on the road, I'm super confident that this team can now make a run at a playoff spot or at least be at the top levels of college football within the top 10.
For me, it's I'm gonna go with North Carolina. I think first of all, Drake May is an elite quarterback. He hasn't played like it so far. He's only got 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions through his first 2 games. He doesn't have the same elite receivers he does a year ago, but he's still a guy that can pick apart your defense because he knows it and he studies it, and he's going to be an NFL quarterback. That game is on the road. Miami's lost 4 in a row to that team. I want to see them go into North Carolina and dominate them up front, because I look at North Carolina. That first game, they gave up 9, they had 9 sacks on defense. They didn't have any against Appalachian State. I expect Miami to be able to protect Tyler Van Dyke in that game, and I want to see him put up big numbers, right? Like if you're really turned into a big boy program, you beat those teams convincingly, right? You beat a North Carolina convincingly on the road, where you're not doing it because, they're missing guys who are being held out or injuries. Like if you're a better offensive line, a better defensive line, show it against those guys. Exercise those demons. When they do that, that's when I'll believe that they've got a chance to beat Clemson and they got a chance to beat Florida State. So for
And I think
me,
that's the game they're most likely to win, in my opinion, of the 3,
mm-hmm.
because it's earlier in the season, less chance for significant injury. And like I said to begin the season, I think Drake May is going to miss Phil Longo. That guy's a hell of an offensive coordinator.
Yeah. We'll go back to recruiting here real quick. This is from Shane Kelly, Shane_KK Kelly. With Blunt committing, will that do anything to help with 24 kids? There's also talk that he may reclassify. Miami is already at 22 commitments for this cycle, starting to feel like guys will get dropped, right? Yeah, Shane, I think, look, I haven't sat there and counted how many draft eligible guys are on Miami's roster, but I would say there's probably, with the transfers and everybody else and what they retained, probably somewhere in the range of 25 to 27 guys. But let's not forget, Mario's pretty good at convincing guys to leave too, and I would suspect that they'll have more than enough. I guess in me answering your question, I wouldn't worry about the number. Like you have 85 to play with every single year now. It's not, hey, you can only sign 25. You got to drop guys. I think Miami keeps everybody that they really want, and I think they drop whoever they don't want. Like Mario's not going to be scared to do that kind of stuff as far as
we saw this past offseason.
Right. And then as far as Blunt committing, will that do anything? No, but I think it builds momentum, right? Like it gets more kids to pay attention who maybe weren't considering Miami. To me, this will be a phenomenal class if you get Jeremiah Smith to stay home. Like if you get Jeremiah Smith, you convince him at the last minute to flip on Ohio State and sign with this program, then I'm going to be like, okay, that's the U is back to recruiting the way the U is supposed to. Right? They're maybe not winning on the field yet the way you want them to, but they're recruiting at the level you need them to. And that's going to be a big one for me down the stretch. All right. This one is from Asher Wildman from Spectrum News. Asher always sends us questions. Both of you seen a ton of quarterbacks come through Miami, recruiting transfers, guys who waited behind guys. What's your take on Emery Williams from what you've seen? Compare him to anyone over the years.
I like what I've seen. I think the kid shows good pocket presence. I think he's got good patience. I think the game is still a little bit too fast for him. He doesn't process as quickly as he needs to, but that's expected as a freshman. I really don't know who to compare him to, because he could be almost like a Brad Kaya, but he seems more athletic to me than Brad Kaya. He's accurate with the football. He's decisive. I like what I've seen so far. So right now I can't give you a comparison, but I like him. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I'm having trouble with a comparison as well. I think Brad Kaya is a good one. What I liked from Emery last night, and I made mention of this in the press box with a few of the other writers, when he got sacked for the first time, when he got hit, it was almost like he didn't expect it, and I almost, not that I think that's a good thing necessarily, but he's a guy that's so sort of zoned into finding receivers downfield that he doesn't have happy feet. Like he didn't show happy feet at any point. And I think that is super important. Like Miami's going to have a good offensive line for the years to come. And the reason I think Emery, and you alluded to this earlier, I think the reason Emery is sort of viewed as ahead of Jakari is because he stays in the pocket and he trusts his feet and he stays planted and he looks down the field and he makes the throws that he's supposed to make. So I just think you need that in a quarterback in college football today. Somebody who's going to trust his offensive line, and that's the element that I like the most about Emery Williams right now.
And he moves well in the pocket. He feels pressure well. He'll get away. He'll slip, and
Right.
he'll look downfield. He keeps his eyes downfield, and he delivers a ball accurately, which I think is the main reason why he's ahead of Jakari at this point.
Yeah. Brian Haley, thanks for sending a question. He wanted to know about injuries. Robert Freeborn wanted me to invite Ebony Lifestyles on the show, and then Gary's guys says, "What's the score between Bethune-Cookman and IMG?" Those are some of the other comments. Yeah, I listen. Bethune-Cookman could certainly beat IMG. I'm not one of these guys who thinks high school teams could dominate college teams per se. Anyway, Sam Knowlton, last question. Since you guys asked for future topics, can we discuss media etiquette in general? There are certain reporters who will remain nameless, but I mean, come on, who ask 10-minute meandering questions that end up offending everyone involved. What can be done about this? All right, Sam, first of all, I haven't been to a single press conference since the season started in terms of during the week. So I apologize. I've been at home working on other things. So I haven't asked any questions. I have watched the press conferences, and I know people are constantly criticizing the media for some of the questions that they ask. I'm with you. I get annoyed by the 10-minute meandering questions. I get annoyed by the talk about, just telling a coach, can you talk about that stuff? To me is lazy. I've been to a couple of the post-game press conferences. I've asked a couple of questions of Mario. I asked specifically about recruiting after the Texas A&M win. I can tell you this from doing this job for a long time. Sometimes it's very nerve-wracking for journalists to have to ask a question. And so sometimes they will talk too much because they're nervous. It doesn't matter if you've been doing this job for 5 years, 5 months, or 50 years. Like there's some people who are just nervous. And I think, for those of you criticizing the media, like it's like sitting here and criticizing a quarterback. You've never played the position, right? I mean, Carlos, you have, but not a lot of people have. So
Not well.
No, not well. But the point is, like, be nice. There's no reason to be a hater over the questions. I understand. Like, I get annoyed with you. I'm with you. Like, I'm annoyed with the whole 10-minute question thing. I don't know why we need that. But I think for the most part, the journalists who cover this team try to do a good job, and they're not being insincere assholes. And I've been around other people who are insincere assholes on other beats.
Exactly, man. Listen, not everyone's the lead at their job. Some people are okay. Some people have bad days. Some people just don't do a great job. And at the end of the day, what does it bother you to ask a crappy question anymore? Just don't listen to the answer. Don't listen to the question. If you're listening to press conferences live, then hey, more power to you. Maybe hit mute when you hear that person's name, and then move on to the next question.
Yeah, Carlos, I got nothing else. Do you have anything else?
No, man, not at this time. But I will say, if we're going back to our first episode of the season, where we're talking about projecting stats, I projected TVD 3,200 yards, 32 touchdowns. He's on track for 3,280, 31 touchdowns. I said Restrepo would be a leading receiver, looking good right now. My numbers, baby, my numbers are looking good.
You are, and so is his team. I said they'd average. I think I said that they'd run for over 2,000 yards this year, and I think they're certainly on pace for that in terms of rushing yardage and rushing output. So I think as long as the guys stay healthy on the offensive line, this team has a chance to meet a lot of its goals from a statistical standpoint. But I just don't think they're very deep beyond the sixth guy. I think we saw that.
Yeah, I
yesterday.
think all over the field they have that issue, except for I think defensive line and linebacker.
Yeah. Carlos, thanks for coming on with me, talking about the Canes. I don't know that we will have necessarily a Temple preview per se, but Wide Right will certainly still be around. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you subscribe to the Wide Right podcast on YouTube and wherever you download your podcast. And make sure you subscribe to Carlos's MIA All Day podcast. Follow him as well on Twitter at
El Ledo 1307, ELLEDO 1307, and at MIA All Day Pod.
All right. Thank you for tuning in to Wide Right. I'm Manny Navarro. He's Carlos Ledo. We'll see you next time.
Peace.